Hey everyone, have you ever I don't know, just stopped and thought about whether AI will actually become as smart as us humans one day? Well, there's this new benchmark called GAIA that's letting that to the test. And I gotta say, the results are pretty surprising.
Yeah, it's definitely something to think about. You know what's interesting about GAIA? It's not like those other AI benchmarks out there that focus on the things that are hard for us humans. It's like they flip the script. They're focusing on the tasks that we find easy, but are actually incredibly complex for AI to do. We're not talking about like beating chess grandmasters or anything. It's more about can AI book a flight or follow a recipe or even just figure out those crazy complicated assembly instructions we all hate.
Oh, so it's like less about AI being some kind of super genius and more about it being able to handle those everyday things that we do without even thinking.
Exactly. The whole idea behind GIA is that a truly general AI assistant, one that could really help us out in the real world, it should be able to navigate the real world with the same kind of flexibility and common sense that we have. And the paper's findings are really something. I mean, the average person scores like a 92% success rate on these GIA tasks, but even GPT-4, with all its fancy plugins and all that, it only manages about a 15% success rate.
Whoa, a 15% success rate. That's a huge difference. Okay, so what exactly are these questions? What makes these GAA challenges so tricky for AI?
Oh, imagine it's like climbing a mountain with three different levels of difficulty. Level one is like base camp, right? It might involve something like finding specific data on a website. Like, let's say you need to find the enrollment number for a clinical trial.
Okay.
For us, it's a simple search,
Yeah,
but AI, it needs to be able to navigate the web, find the right page, and then extract that exact information.
gotcha. So what about level two? What kind of challenges do we run into there?
Now we're getting a bit higher up the mountain. Level two, it involves multiple steps and might require using different tools. So think about it like this. Imagine you're trying to figure out how the butterfat content of your favorite ice cream compares to the federal standards.
Sounds easy enough.
It does, right? But for AI, it would need to access information maybe from Wikipedia or something and then make the calculation.
Oh, I see.
So it requires connecting different pieces of information and tools, which, we do naturally, but AI really struggles with.
Okay, I'm starting to get why these tasks are so hard for AI. It's not just about knowing facts, it's about understanding how to use them in different contexts. Okay, hit me with the real challenge here. What do those level three tasks look like?
All right, level three. This is the summit, the most challenging peak. These are the questions they designed for a near perfect AI assistant. So picture this. You're given a NASA photo with a group of astronauts. Your task, you got to identify a specific astronaut in that photo and then calculate their total time spent in space, down to the minute.
Whoa,
Yeah.
that sounds like a ton of work. I mean, even I would need some serious time to figure that out.
Right, and it could involve image recognition, searching across multiple sources, maybe pulling data from astronaut databases, then doing some time calculations. It's the complexity of those level 3 tasks really highlights the gap between human intelligence and what AI can do right now. And it's not even just about how complicated those tasks are, it's also about the time it takes to solve them. That's another big difference between us humans and how AI performs. Like humans could take I don't know, maybe 6 to 17 minutes to work through one of those level 3 questions, but AI is nowhere near that fast.
It's almost like we humans have this built-in advantage when it comes to connecting the dots and finding information from all these different places. Kind of makes you wonder, are we always going to be chasing a moving target? Will AI ever catch up to human intelligence?
That's a really good question, and honestly, it's one that researchers are always trying to figure out. GIA definitely shows us there's a big gap, but it also gives us a sort of roadmap for how AI could be developed in the future. One really interesting thing they found is that GPT-4, when it has those plugins, does a bit better on GIA. It's still nowhere near as good as humans, but it does suggest that giving AI access to more tools and capabilities could be the key.
So it's not just about making AI bigger and more powerful, it's about giving it the right tools to use that power the right way.
Yes, exactly. Like, imagine if you gave someone a super powerful engine, but no car to put it in. They're not going to get very far. In the same way, AI needs those, I don't know what to call them, those vehicles, the tools and interfaces that let it use its intelligence in the real world. And those plugins are kind of a step towards that.
That makes a lot of sense. But it also makes me wonder if we want AI to use these tools effectively, doesn't it also need to understand the world better? Like, how do you teach AI common sense or the ability to learn from experience the way humans do?
Yeah, that is like one of the toughest problems in AI research right now. Think about it. We humans We take common sense for granted. We just know that water is wet or that you can't walk through walls. But for AI, all that stuff has to be specifically programmed or learned by feeding it huge amounts of data. And even then, AI can still have trouble with unexpected situations, or those subtle little details that humans pick up on without even trying.
This whole conversation is making me realize just how complicated human intelligence really is. We do so much without even thinking about it. And it makes those big AI achievements, like beating us at chess or writing poetry, it makes them seem kind of less impressive, because they're just focused on one specific thing.
It is kind of a paradox, isn't it? AI is amazing at those narrowly focused tasks, and often it's even better than humans. But then it struggles with the everyday kind of general intelligence that we don't even think about. GIA really shows that difference, I think. It's not just about asking, can AI beat humans, but more like, can AI think like humans? And that is a much bigger question.
Absolutely. It's like comparing a specialized calculator to a human brain. You know, the calculator might be way faster at crunching numbers, but the brain can do so much more. It can learn, it can adapt, it can create, and it can understand the world in a way that a calculator just can't. What I find really interesting, though, is that even though this research is showing us the limits of AI, it's also helping us understand the nature of intelligence itself, both human and artificial.
Yeah, I agree. And it's forcing us to think differently about how we design and evaluate AI systems. The GIA researchers, they actually mentioned something really interesting about this. They said it's important to look not just at the final answer the AI gives, but also at its reasoning process, how it got there.
Oh, that's interesting. So it's like it's not enough to just see the answer to a math problem. You want to understand the steps that were taken to get to that solution, right?
Exactly. Like, you know how sometimes you can guess the answer on a multiple choice test, even if you don't really understand the material? Well, the GAIA people wanted to make sure that AI couldn't do that. They did it on purpose. They avoided using multiple choice questions because AI systems can sometimes figure out how to game the system if they're good at pattern recognition. So instead of multiple choice, the AI has to actually generate a specific answer, like a number, a word, or a list of items. That makes it a lot harder to just get lucky. It forces the AI to show that it actually understands the problem and can solve it.
Right. We don't want an AI that's just good at guessing. We want to know it's actually thinking like a human would. But how do you evaluate that thought process? I mean, that seems pretty hard to do in a way that's fair and consistent.
It is tough. And even the GAA researchers admit that while evaluating that reasoning trace, the steps the AI takes to solve a problem is super important, it's also really hard to do objectively. They suggested that maybe future versions of GAA could include some kind of human or model-based evaluation to check the AI's thought process, but that's still something people are researching.
So it's almost like we're trying to look inside the black box of AI and understand how it's actually making decisions.
Yeah, you got it. And that's essential not just for understanding how AI works, but also for making sure it's making decisions in a way that's aligned with our values and goals? We don't want AI that can solve complicated problems, but gets to those solutions by using reasoning that's flawed or biased in some way.
That's a really important point. We need AI that's not only smart, but also ethical, right? AI that's aligned with human values. This deep dive is really showing just how much goes into creating AI that is both capable and responsible.
It's a complicated challenge, that's for sure. And GAIA is really making us think about all those different aspects. But you know what I find really cool about all this? The GAIA researchers pointed out how AI can be a really powerful tool for accessibility and inclusion. They even put tasks in the benchmark that could be especially helpful for people with disabilities, like those with visual or auditory impairments.
That's really interesting. I hadn't thought about it that way before. What kinds of tasks are we talking about?
Well, imagine an AI assistant that can listen to an audio file and pick out specific information. That would be super helpful for someone who can't see well. Or an AI that can navigate a complicated website, especially one that isn't really designed for accessibility, and read the important stuff out loud for someone who has trouble reading. Those are just a couple examples, but they show how AI can be used not just to copy what humans can do, but to make those abilities better and extend them in ways that are really meaningful.
That's a really powerful idea. It changes how we usually think about AI. Instead of seeing it as something that might replace us, we can think of it as a way to empower people and help those who are already dealing with limitations.
Exactly. I think that's a much more human-centered way to approach AI development. It's all about figuring out how to use these technologies to create a world that's more inclusive and fair for everyone.
I love that perspective. It reminds us that AI is basically a tool. And just like any tool, it can be used for good or bad. It's our job to make sure we're developing and using these technologies in a way that benefits everyone.
Couldn't have said it better myself.
This has been such an interesting conversation. We've covered a lot of ground from the technical side of creating general AI to the ethical things we need to consider when developing and using it. But I'm really curious to learn more about how GAI itself was created. I mean, it seems like a massive undertaking to design a benchmark that can actually evaluate something as complex as human intelligence.
It is really impressive. The researchers who created GIA have done an amazing job thinking through all the details and challenges. They've really pushed the boundaries of AI evaluation.
Well, I'm definitely ready to hear more about that. In the next part, let's unpack how GAIA was made, like the methods they used, the challenges they ran into, and the lessons they learned along the way. Stay tuned. Welcome back, everyone. We've been taking this deep dive into GAIA, this really cool AI benchmark that tests how well AI can handle real-world tasks. The stuff we humans find pretty easy, but like we've been saying, the story of how they actually created GAIA, that's pretty interesting too. It's not just about like coming up with tricky questions. It's about making sure those questions are actually measuring what they're supposed to.
You're absolutely right. I've spent a good chunk of time working with research data sets myself, and I'm really impressed with how thorough and careful the GAIA team was. They really didn't take any shortcuts when it came to making sure every single question was well written, challenging, and most importantly, super clear.
Okay, so tell me more about that process. How did they make those questions so good?
Well, first they had human annotators, actually people, write the questions, getting ideas from real-world situations. But they didn't stop there. To make sure there wasn't any confusion or ambiguity, they had two more annotators answer each question separately.
Wait, so three different people had to agree on the answer before a question could be included in GAIA. That's some serious quality control.
Oh yeah, they were super strict about it. If there was any disagreement at all, they either changed the question or just threw it out completely. They were really dedicated to making sure the benchmark was solid. They knew AI systems can be sneaky. They can find loopholes in the wording or figure out shortcuts to the right answer that the researchers didn't even intend.
So it's like they were playing a game of chess against these super smart machines, trying to think ahead and block every possible move.
Exactly. And speaking of challenges, one thing they had to deal with was the fact that the internet is always changing. What happens if a GAIA question uses information from a website that gets updated or taken down? The whole internet is like a moving target.
That's a great point. How did they deal with that?
They had to be really strategic. They tried to stick with sources that weren't likely to change much, like official archives or established databases. And sometimes they even specified a specific version of a web page to make sure things stayed consistent. Just imagine trying to track down one specific piece of information when the entire online world is constantly shifting around you. It's mind-boggling.
It really shows how complicated it is to create a benchmark that can accurately assess something as dynamic and ever-changing as AI. It's like building a ruler for something that's constantly growing and changing its shape.
That's a great analogy. And it really speaks to the fact that AI evaluation is a field that's always evolving too. We're still figuring out the best ways to measure and assess what these systems can do. And the GIA team deserves credit for being upfront about the limitations of their work.
I always appreciate researchers who are open about the limitations of their work. What were some of the limitations they highlighted?
One of the big ones, which we've talked about a bit already, is that there isn't a standard way to evaluate the AI's reasoning process. We want to know not only if the AI got the right answer, but also how it got there. Did it use logic and reasoning that's similar to how a human would think, or did it just stumble onto the solution in some other way?
Yeah, because that tells us if the AI really understands what's going on or if it's just mimicking intelligence.
Exactly. And they also acknowledge that right now GAIA is only in English, which obviously leaves out a huge part of the world's population. They stress the need for future versions of the benchmark to include more languages and cultures. After all, intelligence isn't limited to just one language or culture.
That's so important. It reminds us that even as we try to create more advanced AI systems, we need to be inclusive and make sure these technologies benefit everyone, not just a small group.
I completely agree. The researchers also brought up some really interesting questions about the bigger picture of AI evaluation. Like, how do we evaluate AI systems that are closed source, where we can't see how the model works on the inside?
That's a tough one. It's like trying to judge a book by its cover without being able to actually read the words. How do we know what's really going on in those AI brains if we can't see the thought process?
It's a big challenge for sure. And it gets to the core of the issue of transparency and accountability with AI. How do we make sure these systems are making decisions that are fair, unbiased, and something humans can understand.
It's like we're exploring a whole new world here. We're creating these incredibly powerful technologies, but we're still figuring out the rules, the ethical guidelines, and the best ways to understand their impact on society.
This whole deep dive has really been a journey for me. We've gone from exploring the details of how AI can solve problems like humans do to thinking about the very nature of intelligence itself. And we've come across some pretty deep questions about what AI will be like in the future and how it will shape our world.
I couldn't have said it better myself. It's been an amazing exploration of the latest AI research, the hurdles we face in creating truly intelligent machines, and what all this means for humanity. I think the most important thing we've learned is that this is just the beginning. The quest to create truly intelligent AI is still going strong, and benchmarks like GAIA are essential tools that will help us navigate this complex and exciting landscape. Thanks for joining us on this deep dive. Until next time, keep those minds curious and stay tuned for more explorations into the world of fascinating information.